Welcome to Rick's Corner. I have a very old friend here, Doug Brignole, who's been in bodybuilding for numbers of years. He just turned 55.
55 this month.
This month. What was the date?
December 15th, last month.
Oh, last month. Okay, just before Christmas.
Yeah.
So see, presents are kind of integrated with Christmas and birthdays. They'll come. Here's for both.
Exactly.
You always get cheated, right? Well, you know, bodybuilding history, we both go back a long, long way. And there's a lot of newcomers out there like you young guys, and there's a lot of older timers that I get a lot of email from about training, about injuries and how they stay in shape and what do you want to do to eat and how do you train and how many body parts and how many sets. Nobody really knows it,
Right.
how this works.
Right.
And you've been around this a long time. You've had gyms.
A gym.
You had a gym.
Fantastic gym in Pasadena.
That's right. And you have a immense hard drive in your head full of knowledge of what we discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe not in the same areas as you, but in different areas, yeah. Diverse.
I'm not talking about porn.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious about this. You started training at what age?
At the age of 15, actually, at home, and 16 at Bill Pearl's gym.
Then Pasadena.
In Pasadena, yeah.
That was after he moved from Inglewood.
Yes.
See, now that's where I started with Bill Pearl's gym in Inglewood, which was a good old hardcore gym.
Yeah, no, he took me under his wing. He let me scrub his showers in exchange for membership. It was great. He was like a mentor dad to me.
Was Harold Pearl over there?
Yes, he was.
He was bigger than Bill.
Yeah, but not the same kind of big.
No,
bigger boned.
Yeah, he was
but not quality muscle.
I always told him he looked like a Neanderthal caveman.
Well, he had the ponytail and he had the mustache.
Yeah. And he had his, and on the weekends at the old gym, he'd go up in the attic and he'd sit up there and he'd drink 2 cases of beer and watch TV all weekend.
Yeah, when I was working there, I was 16 years old, and he gives me like a Coke and rum. I'm 16 years old.
I just moved here. He gives me needles. He says, "Here's how you inject B12 into your leg."
Oh my God!
He gave me fat burners. I said, he says, "I've never stuck a needle in me." He says, "You take a broomstick and you whack your leg really hard, put the needle in, and then pull it out." And he says, "The blood will run to it, and the stuff will squirt right out of your leg into the air."
Yeah, he was completely the opposite of Bill. Bill was straight and conservative and diplomatic, and Harry was everything but.
Yeah. All right. So when you started training, then you learned a lot from Bill.
You know, I did, but you know, I've always been very sort of contrarian. I don't really accept everything I hear. So a lot of things that Bill would say, you know, ironically, and Bill jokes about it in his book. He says, you know, this little kid, 16 years old, was interviewing me to see if I qualified as his trainer. And he was right about that. I wouldn't take anything as gospel. I would question everything.
Right.
And I'm glad I did. I mean, some things that he said proved to be right, and many things he said, in my view, proved to not be right.
But they work for him.
They work for everybody, but they don't work as well as. Better ways.
Let's do an example.
Okay, like a pullover and press. Classic Bill Pro move.
Right.
Pullover, dumbbell, press, right? Well, I mean, you can always press much more than you can pull over.
Yes.
Right? So if you take away the challenges you want to press, it's going to hurt you on a pullover.
Yes.
If you take away that you can handle on a pullover, it's going to leave you less than challenged.
Means nothing.
Right. So that's a classic example of a very typical Bill Pearl recommendation that doesn't really hold water. Really, I mean, we don't even do that. And in fact, the pullover has a very compromised value at all.
Right.
And there's a lot of old school people, by the way, they believe everything old school is good. Some old school thing is good. Some old school things are not.
I never like the pullovers with the dumbbell. They kill my shoulders.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a healthy thing for your shoulder to do.
No, not at all.
Look, I'm a huge believer in evolutionary biology. We have the body we have because of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolution, right? When did a primate ever have to do a pullover? Never, right? So anything you examine in the gym, and everyone knows I'm against overhead presses. When did a primate ever have to push anything over its head?
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that.
Never.
So tell me real quick what your views are, and I want to ask you something.
All right. Well, look, I mean, I'm writing a book right now, and the book is called The Physics of Fitness, and it explains 16 physics and anatomy principles that explain very logically and very consistently why bodybuilding works, why weightlifting works, what has to be in place, where the position of the muscle has to be relative to resistance and things like this. And if you look at traditional bodybuilding, what you find is a lot of things are inconsistent. For example, if a bench press is okay despite losing this much range of motion, then why don't we do everything half range of motion? We don't accept it on everything else. Why should we accept it on chest? That's one example. But the point is that now that I'm 55 years old, and the reason, I'm sure you're going to ask me this question, but one of the reasons I've been able to come back so well is because I've had to change everything.
Right.
And having changed everything, I realized if I had done what I'm doing now back then, I would have been better off.
Yeah, I get that. Bench presses, I was always a good bencher. I'd go wide grip or I'd go shoulder grip, and I'd do like 450. I don't think that it really improved my muscularity that much. It gave me strength.
Well, you know, that's one thing I always want to make clear. If you're lifting weights for the purpose of seeing how much you can lift,
right,
then that's one thing. But if your goal is to develop muscle,
Right.
it's a different thing entirely.
Totally.
If you want to improve your bench press, you have to bench press. If you want to develop your pecs, bench press is one of the least likely to do it.
Exactly. But if you take dumbbells and you
Yes.
do dumbbell presses, not heavy, and you come up and you bring them together.
Right, because the contraction, the squeezing in the center
Right.
is an important part of it. And then when you're bench pressing, the fact that the bar has to, quote, touch your chest
Right.
means your elbows are going too low, and that's bad for the shoulders.
Yes.
But if you don't bring the bar all the way down and you stop halfway up, then it feels like a very short movement, right?
Yes.
But if you've got dumbbells, it doesn't feel so short because
No.
you're coming up farther.
Exactly. Exactly. Overhead presses. All right. We're all believers that years ago that a good standing military press develops the shoulders. Ken Waller told me, Rich Piana told me, don't do them. And I said, why? They said that damages your joints and doesn't do anything for your delts.
Right.
Do all your lateral movements, your
Right.
front, your sides, your rears.
Right.
And I really do believe that
Right.
because now when I do presses, even on the Smith machine, my shoulders sound like ratchet
Yeah.
wrenches, and they hurt.
I'll tell you,
had a cortisone shot.
the overhead press really makes no sense at all. Okay,
Yeah.
if you look at Gray's Anatomy and you look at what these muscles do, the lateral deltoid does one thing. It's called lateral abduction.
Right.
The front deltoid does one thing. It's moving the arm to the front.
Right.
And the rear does something to the rear. Right.
Right.
Overhead press doesn't look like any of those.
It doesn't.
Right? So then what you have to do is you have to take this lever and rotate it up, which rotates your whole arm inside the shoulder socket. Right?
Right.
So that's not good. Then when you push it up straight over your head, you automatically impinge. If you Google impingement syndrome,
Yes.
you will find the obvious. Everybody shows illustrations of it. There's a supraspinatus tendon that comes out from underneath your shoulder blade, and it holds this bone in. Right? So if you can imagine this little tendon coming out like this, every time you lift that arm up over your shoulders, you squeeze that tendon and the bursa sac in between. And if you do it repeatedly, it inflames. If you do it more repeatedly, it ruptures.
Right. This
Right?
is what causes the pain.
This is, and it says if you Google most common cause of impingement syndrome, it'll say repeatedly putting your arms up over your head.
Yeah.
There's no it's inevitable, right? And
Yeah.
yet, there's no trade-off. In other words, if you're going to sacrifice your shoulder joint, at least give me a huge payoff.
Right.
And there isn't a payoff. Why? Because once you take this side deltoid muscle and you rotate it to the rear, now it's not opposing resistance.
Right.
Right? So now this is mostly front deltoid.
Right.
And you might say, well, I want front deltoid. Yeah, but there's better ways to work front deltoid.
Well, bench press works front delt.
Yes, but you're better off coming from the front this way
And up.
for front deltoid
Right.
as opposed to coming this way.
Right. The other thing was, and a lot of you guys have said this, I see you in the gym say, I see you doing behind the neck presses. And those are killer.
Yeah.
Those are killer. And I said, why? Well, I'm working my rear delt. No, you're not.
No, you're not. It's not even the right position for that.
No, it's if working out behind the neck is more front delt, and it just impinges your shoulders greatly.
Well, look, first of all, it's hard enough to even, most people don't have enough shoulder mobility to even get their forearm vertical.
Right.
Right? This is, now you have to do more than vertical to
Yes.
get it behind your head.
Yes.
Right? So now not only are you excessively externally rotating the shoulder, but now this is becoming an active lever which wants to fall that way.
Right.
Right? Well, if it wants to fall that way, you're straining the rotator cuff muscles just to keep it from falling backward.
Yes.
It's a horrible
Wow.
trade-off, and there's no benefit. Well, there is some benefit, clearly. I mean, but if you were going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 for benefit, you could say, okay, so it's a 4 benefit. Not as good as side raise for benefit, and it's got a 9-10 risk.
Yeah.
It's just not a good trade-off.
Nope. Nope. I agree
But
with you.
let me just tell you real briefly now, this is where people sort of argue with me. They'll say, so you mean to tell me that a standing side raise is going to be good enough to replace the overhead press? And I say, well, not quite. This is the correct movement. But there's a thing that's called stretch position loading. And that means where in the range of motion is that muscle finding more or less resistance?
Okay.
When you're hanging straight down like this, you got 0.
Right.
It increases to maximum at the top.
Right.
That's the opposite of our strength curve.
Okay.
We get stronger in the beginning of a movement and weaker at the end of a movement.
Right.
That's proved when you do a tricep kickback.
Yes.
Right? So what you want is heavier in the beginning and lighter at the end, and you do that either by lying horizontal on a floor mat or on a
Okay.
bench, or maybe a very slight incline,
Right.
or using a cable. And then you want most resistance right out of the gate, and then you want it to diminish as you get to the top,
Right.
not increase as it gets
Yeah.
to the top. That's the trade-off for the overhead press.
And so it's lying.
Lying down, or a very slight incline, or cables.
Do you remember a bodybuilder of this guy goes way back to the 50s, Joe Barata?
No.
Joe Barata owned a chain of gyms, and he was...
I'm almost hurt because I almost know everybody.
No, he's a short guy.
How did I miss him?
Well, he's passed away since, but I worked for him in Bakersfield. He had a chain of gyms, Sacramento and Bakersfield. He was with Arnold and Marshall and the guys in the original Holiday Health Spas, I believe. And he'd come and work out quick. He's a very fast, high-paced guy. And he never did presses, but he'd lay on a sit-up bench, back, just a little incline, and he would do these.
Right.
And then
Serge Newbray did those. He was famous for those.
And it was always front here and here. He'd go all the way around.
Right.
And then he did this way.
Right.
And that was his whole delt workout. And he had these big round delts.
Right. That's right. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you look at someone like Arnold and you say, well, Arnold had big shoulders and he did overhead press. Well, yeah, but he also did the one I was just describing and did a lot of the things.
A lot of those.
The exercises that aren't very good and are risky don't reduce the benefit from the other ones.
Right.
Right? It's just unnecessary.
You don't need it.
Time, energy.
And an added risk.
Yeah.
What about squats?
Squats are great.
Okay.
Squats are great, except, in your case, probably holding the bar is hard.
Really hard.
Right? Because you have to really rotate your arms to get that. So that makes it difficult. The movement itself, anatomically, for the knees and the hips and the back, that's all great stuff. The problem is that some of us can't rotate our arms far back enough comfortably to hold that bar. And having a lot of weight pushing right down on that spine isn't so great. Now, you can hold a pair of dumbbells, but your legs are a lot stronger than your arms.
Right.
So once you get up to 100-pound dumbbells, you're squatting 200 pounds, but you might be able to squat 300 pounds, right?
Yeah.
And it's
and
pretty
your arms getting tired.
Yeah, so now there is one machine right now that I love. It's called the free motion squat machine.
This is my next question.
Yeah, there is. It's the only one that I think is a good, because the leg press won't cut it. I'll tell you why. But this machine puts the pads right here on your shoulders. It literally allows you to come down and up, down. So your lower back is tipping forward and then up, right? So it follows the exact same movement of a regular squat without putting the weight right on your spine. And without having you can even
Is this the big harness one?
It's the one. No, it's not a harness. It's got like a lever that pivots back here, and the pads are up here.
Right. They have this at Gold's.
Yeah,
it's a round thing that goes over your shoulders, and then you load it out here.
Yeah, and it's got like a back pad and two pads right here. No, it's got a plate load.
Oh, okay.
It's a plate load.
The only thing on this one I see that when you load it out here, you're really making that weight go like this. If the weights were back here, they'd go this way.
Yeah.
So you have to
well, the point is, a squat is a good movement if you can find a way to not load up your spine, not load up your shoulders.
Right. Now, why do you say? I'm doing this. I agree with you, but I want them to hear this.
Yeah.
Why leg press doesn't work?
Well, here's the thing: is most leg presses don't even have a back adjustment that allows you to go back far enough to get enough range of motion with your legs. They come in, they collide with your chest.
Right.
So you don't get as much range of motion as you would with a squat.
Okay.
Number one. Number two is most people think that the heavier you go, the better. So they subconsciously put their feet very high on the foot plate. And what ends up happening when you do that is you take your lower leg bone and you make it almost parallel with the direction of the sled.
Okay.
Well, resistance is based on the angle of the lever that's working. So, for example, if you do a sissy squat, you know what that is, right? Do you think our audience knows what sissy squat is?
Well,
should I demonstrate it?
Yes.
A sissy squat is when you lean back and let your knees go way forward over your toes, so that your lower leg is almost perpendicular to gravity.
Right.
Okay, now that's what I call 100% lever.
Right.
It's at the maximum loading position. A leg press is only at about a 15-degree angle to resistance, which means you're only getting about 16% of the load that's on the machine.
Yeah, I never feel it when I do them.
So, and then if you say, well, where's the rest going? It's going on your glutes, but it's an incomplete movement because glute contraction happens when you go all the way back past the parallel position with your torso.
Like with a lunge. With
a lunge. Well, when you stand up, when you push that back, that's when you contract the glute. Right. If you don't do that, you don't contract. And where does the leg press end? 45-degree angle to your torso.
What about there's a leg press at the gym that you lie down in and you got the selector eyes and you can bring the back up or leave it down, but you're pushing this way and you're laying flat. Now, when I do those, I visualize I'm squatting because you're really in the squat position. Feel it much more than the other leg press.
Well, the real key, whether you're using a leg press or whether you're using some kind of squat machine, the real key is to get that back as far back as you can so that when you lock out, your femurs, your upper legs are parallel to your torso.
Okay.
That would be the ideal, right?
Okay.
And put your feet as low on the pedestal as you can because the lower they go, the more quad you get.
Okay.
And usually what we want is quad.
Right.
We don't have any problem getting our glutes to work.
No.
But we get it. We want our quads to grow. So you don't really want to minimize the quad work by putting your feet so high that it's almost all glutes.
Okay. What about biceps?
Biceps is really straightforward.
Dumbbell
curls.
It goes up and down.
It's just it's one of the simplest muscles to work. I mean, you almost can't go wrong with just doing a regular. I mean, honest to God, people look for the fancy Zottman curls and things. No, a straight alternate dumbbell curl is all you need.
Gets the whole job done.
It's all you
and
need.
You know, there was a friend of mine that hasn't done biceps since last November, I believe, and his arms look bigger. I saw him the other day. He says, I haven't worked arms in 2 months. He's doing a lot of pulls with the back, and a lot of pressing, and his arms just came up from it.
Well, I will tell you one thing that's helped me a lot, especially in the last 6 months, and that is that, you know, in about 2010, 2011, I got on this kick where I thought heavy is good, heavy is best. So I did everything heavy, low reps, right? And I was really disappointed in 2010 and 2011. I was skinny. I was really sort of sinewy looking, right? I was lean, but I didn't really have a lot of thickness. So then I was talking to Steve Holman, who's the editor-in-chief of Ironman magazine, and he was explaining to me, no, high reps builds the sarcoplasmic part of the muscle. That's the fuel tank around the muscle fiber. So I went, so what did I do? All high reps.
How many?
Up to 50.
Oh boy,
right? But not lower than 10, all right? And I did much better this past year in competition. I was much fuller. And then I thought, I'm going to try going even heavier still. So now what I do is this. 50 reps, 40, 30, 20, 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4.
It's a lot of sets.
Increasing the weight on every set, resting about 2 minutes between sets, right? But I'm growing a lot from those 8, 6s, and 4s that I wasn't getting before. So the truth is you need the high reps, but you also need the low reps.
You need both.
You need both.
Years ago I would do 10, 8, 6, 2, 1 for a reps or for a maximum set of weight. And then I'd go back and do 15 after.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get the reps in. I wanted to get the heavy weight in.
I mean, I can't say that my formula is perfect, but I will say that we're on the same page.
It works.
You need the high reps, you need the low reps.
Right. Yeah. And there are no exotic moves for bicep. I mean, you work the bicep, it works up and down. That's how it works.
There's no magic to it.
There's no magic to it, and you don't need all that many sets.
And you can't change the shape of it.
No. Shape is what it is.
It's genetically determined.
People say, I want that big peak like Robbie Robinson. You know what? He was born with that.
Well, and what's funny is you'll see a guy like Robbie Robinson doing some weird exercise. You go, aha!
That's why.
That's it. That's the secret. Well, a lot of people do that. Well, they don't have Robbie arms.
Yeah. Now I'm posting some pictures of you because you were in great shape this past year and you won some contests. Tell me about what happened.
Well, I competed in the Venice Beach International and took first place in the over 50 division. I was very pleased with that. My condition was very good. And then a couple weeks later, I went to Northern Ireland and I competed in the NABA World Championship. And I placed 7th. But, you know, look, a lot of people disagreed with that decision. If you look at the pictures, you know, and I've been a judge for a lot of years, I would have placed me 3rd. I definitely wouldn't have said I should have won. 3rd, 4th, 5th. I mean, you could look at these people and say, but you know, the problem with bodybuilding has always been it's subjective.
It is subjective. It's the eyes of the judge.
No one crosses the finish line first. It's not an absolute thing. So, and that's why I don't care. If you asked me how was 2014, I would say it was a grand slam. Did I win? No, but it was still a grand slam. I did what I wanted to do. I looked the way I wanted to look.
And you look great on top of that, and that's what mattered.
That's what matters. I got great pictures.
Well, they're putting them up. How did you change your diet for that year?
Good question. You know, I don't know what year it was, but when the zone came out, I was convinced these guys were right. Carbs were the enemy. And so I did this whole glycemic index thing where I eliminated the starches, which, you know, back in the day, we used to eat rice cakes. Well, that's rice. That's quote-unquote high glycemic. Potatoes were out. You know, pasta was out. Well, we were eating fruits and vegetables at this point, maybe a little bit more nuts and olive oil and some fats instead of the starches, right?
Yes.
And it just destroyed my muscle mass. You cannot keep big muscles if you don't eat enough carbs. What I discovered this year...
There's only one way.
I'm telling you, there's only one. Carbs are almost more important than protein.
Yes. If you starve yourself with carbs and you're on the juice, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
But if you're not, then you got to have the other stuff.
Well, look, there's 3 things that matter. Number 1 is you spend, during a workout, if it's intense, glycogen and glucose. You don't spend protein. Right? So after the workout, you need to recover what you spent. Protein isn't bad, but it's not what you need to replace. What you need to replace right away is glucose because you're hypoglycemic.
This is why guys eat gummy bears.
Gummy bears or Gatorade or chocolate milk. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. So, but that's one thing. The other thing, too, is that if you enter low blood sugar, and a lot of us, especially with my kind of metabolism, my fast metabolism, if I don't eat enough starches, and I mean a lot of potatoes and rice, if I don't eat pasta and starches, then I will be hypoglycemic a little bit all day long.
Yes, I'm the same way.
And if I'm hypoglycemic, I'm producing cortisol. If I'm producing cortisol, I'm breaking down muscle. Yes. So that's number 2. And number 3 is, you know, these pros, I've heard, we've all heard, are injecting insulin.
Yeah.
And so whether or not that's good or bad is beside the point. It made me wonder, why is insulin good?
Yes.
We've heard insulin is bad.
Yes.
Turns out insulin is required in order to push the protein into the muscle.
Yes, I knew that.
No insulin, no protein in the muscle. Okay, now here's the interesting thing is, I won't name any names, but I will say that a lot of the guys that were my contemporaries back then, they were massive, are all fat today. Why? They're insulin producers naturally. What made them big back then was that they were insulin producers. What makes them fat today is that they're insulin producers. In other words, if you work out intensely, you give good purpose to that insulin.
I see.
But if you don't work out intensely, it has nowhere to go but to fat.
Oh, boy, that makes a lot of sense. This is good information.
Very interesting. Now, I'm not an insulin producer. I've always had a hard time gaining mass, but that's why I can get so ripped come contest time.
Right. It is true, after a workout, you need to replace
God,
it.
yes.
You got to do it.
And I made an experiment. I love experimenting. I wanted to see what would happen if I would drink a cup of heavily honeyed water after the workout all the way up until the contest. Didn't phase my getting lean.
No?
Completely ripped, because after we've all heard that the meal that's after the workout is the most forgiving. Well, it's not only the most forgiving, it's also the most critical in terms of not losing muscle. If you don't get sugar in after your workout, even if you're a big bone guy, you will lose muscle. You're hypoglycemic. I always tell people, imagine that you're in a workout and you have a bucket and you're collecting muscles in your workout, but in the process of doing this, you're creating holes in the bottom of your bucket. And you walk away from the workout looking at all this and you don't even know you're leaking muscle as you're going home.
Oh, my God.
Right?
That's
Now,
great.
you got to plug up those holes.
Yeah, yeah.
Glucose.
Yeah.
You need sugar after your workout to plug up those holes, and even a cup of honey water isn't going to be enough to plug it up completely. You've spent a lot more glucose that's what's in that cup of honey water, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to slow that process down, and then about an hour later, you eat a regular meal.
All right, so for your contest, you took in a lot of carbs?
So yeah, what I did is I wanted to see what would happen if I went back to my old school way of doing it, which was rice, all the rice I wanted, all the white rice I wanted. Back then I used to eat minute rice, the worst kind of rice.
Yeah, still rice.
It's still rice, but basmati rice or something like that. But by the way, basmati rice has a much lower glycemic index than potatoes or pasta, so it's actually still a pretty good, relatively low glycemic carb. Anyway, so this was the test for the first 3 days. As much rice as I wanted to, along with my chicken, zero fat. Zero oils, zero everything. No, nothing of any kind. No fruit, no flour products, just rice and chicken, right? Boom, 3 days. I could see myself getting leaner. So then my plan was to have a 3-on, 1-off. On the 4th day, I was going to, quote, carb load. Well, how am I going to carb load? I'm already eating all the carbs I want.
Yeah, sure.
So then I asked myself, well, what am I short on? I'm short on fat. So I started taking in mayonnaise, butter, almond butter, olive oil, all on that day, just as an experiment. And lo and behold, the 5th day, I'm leaner. So I contacted 2 PhDs in nutrition. I said, what the hell's going on here? How is this happening? I mean, I can see that it's happening, but I know that there is a glycogen storage explanation for why you get big after eating carbs. There isn't such a thing as to why you eat, when you eat fat, why you would get bigger and leaner. He says, well, all I can tell you is that you're probably hormone suppressing during your zero fat days and normalizing your hormone production during this 1 day of replenishment and then going back to your depletion. And so you're not losing any fat loss benefits, but you're bringing the muscle back.
Interesting.
And that's what I did. I did basically a free-for-all on that 4th day, and on the 3 days in between, I did zero fat, zero sugar, rice, and chicken.
That's very interesting.
And it worked amazing.
Yeah, you can see by the pictures, I mean, he was in awesome shape.
Yeah.
So now, I think we're out of time. People, if they want to reach you on the internet, where's the best place?
My website is dougbrignole.com or dougbrignole.fitness. Believe it or not, fitness has a category now.
Oh, okay.
And I write for Ironman Magazine. Ironman Magazine was just bought.
Bye.
A bodybuilder, a pro bodybuilder.
Really?
They said his name. I can't remember it. It's a Swedish name.
John Bennett doesn't know him?
John Balick is now, John Balick and Mike Nevue, the photographer, co-owners, are now on hand, and they're sort of positioning themselves, who's going to do what during this transition period.
Oh, I see, okay.
So they're going to stay on as advisors, but I don't, and I've been writing for them, of course. I hope they keep me on as a writer. But, I mean, it's always been a great publication. Those of you that are out there, look, I encourage you to buy the magazine, right? If you don't buy magazines, if everything you want is going to be free, then it's just going to go away.
Exactly.
I mean, the content costs money. I do my writing for free, but, you know, it does cost money.
I have Ironman magazines up there from 1941 that I saved.
Yeah.
And I read them once in a while. There's good stories.
Yeah,
in
you
there.
know, and those are collector's items now.
Yeah, I know. So am I.
Vintage.
Vintage, right, exactly. So DougBrignole.com and Doug Brignole Fitness.
Fitness,
Dot
yeah.
Fitness. Okay, I'm going to put that up so they can find you. This has been really interesting.
Well, thank you. Guys, I said my book's coming out, and I think it's going to come out in about 5-6 months, I think, in print. And I think it's going to really surprise people when you see these explanations.
I'll have you back on with the book, too.
Okay,
and we'll push the book.
Thank
you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
This is always an education for me and you, and something you can take home and work on it and share it with your other friends and make some gains in the gym, and you're going to have a good 2015. Thanks again for watching.
My pleasure. Thank you. All right.
Racing.com. He is the equalizer, baby. See you next time.